Bodie,
Here.
Cacciatore,
Here.
Carberry Montgomery,
Here.
Kroll,
Here.
and Rosendahl is absent today. Oh no, Rosendahl made
he's
it.
here.
He's here. Sorry, in my hubbub, I missed you. Rosendahl,
Here.
thank you.
Okay, item 2 is to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by
Kroll.
Kroll. Motion by Kroll, second by Rosendahl. Discussion, roll call.
All right, Kroll,
Yes.
Rosendahl,
Yes.
Bodie,
Yes.
Carberry Montgomery,
Yes.
Cacciatore,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 is our regular agenda. We have one action item, and that is to consider the business license for the one-day event at the Filipino Festival. So I'd ask for entertain a motion on that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Kroll, second by Bodie. Discussion, roll call.
Kroll,
Yes.
Bodie,
Yes.
Cacciatore,
Yes.
Carberry Montgomery,
Yes.
Rosendahl,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. That item passes. We'll move on to item 3.2, and that is a presentation by Luke Hoffman from the Iowa Bike Coalition. Luke, thanks for being patient, and we will turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thanks everybody for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a more lengthy presentation and discussion and dialogue with all of you here today, outside of the regularly scheduled council meetings, which I know can be jam-packed, having attended one myself now or a few. So I'm just go ahead and pull up my presentation. So give me a second to do that. Share. 1 second. Get to the right beginning slide. Okay. Should be this one, I think. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So you all know me at this point, I think, but Luke Hoffman, Executive Director of the Iowa Bicycle Coalition. I'm here today to talk about the economic and health impacts of cycling and trails study that we conducted and completed this past January. And so just a quick note on what the Iowa Bicycle Coalition is and does. We're a statewide organization promoting safe, accessible, and enjoyable bicycling in Iowa through education, events, better policy, and growing a community of supporters. And I think all of those things are relevant to, your city, but I think in particular, growing that community of supporters and better policy and education. I mean, they all fit well within the wheelhouse of the work that we do, both statewide and locally, especially given what we just accomplished, over there in Urbandale. So that's awesome. So economic impact study of cycling and trails. This is what the kind of marketing materials looked like. You might be familiar with this. We put up a variety of posters physically across B-cycle stations in the bike network here in the kind of greater Des Moines area, and then also had a lot of online presence when we were conducting kind of an initial survey to get stakeholder engagement. So this is what that looked like. We also put up posters in every bike shop as well. So you might be familiar with this. Rob Moore was the study consultant that we used from Columbus, Ohio, and Rob is the past president and current vice president for the Gross National Happiness USA organization, which is a national organization dedicated to the multidimensional measurement of well-being in society. So Rob likes to think about what makes a happy community. What are the conditions necessary to achieve a happy city, a happy community, a happy society? And so that's what Rob thinks about day in and day out. He's based out of Columbus, Ohio. So why did we do this? So the original study that this was an outgrowth of was back in 2012. And that original study showed that the statewide economic impact of cycling and trails was 364.9 million. That was, in 2012, so over 10 years ago. It was a partnership with the University of Northern Iowa, and essentially it boiled down to a partnership with a class of capstone students, and we paid roughly $4,000 for that original study. And I think for its time, it was really workable, as a project. But I think there was a lot of gaps that I hope we filled in this new version, the renewal version. But when it was released, there was kind of a different world that we were living in. Not only was that pre-pandemic, but lots of inflation since then. You've got the prevalency of the bike trails just absolutely exploded. Lots more trails just in terms of sheer quantity and quality. But then also, technology like trail counters, which were predominantly used to produce this study back in the day. The technology, even with trail counters, has changed. They went from using what you would just roll over like you would with tracking a car to like infrared as an option with trail counters. So technology has changed, society has changed, economics have changed. And then one of the more important things is, the framework for the study that we used. I mentioned trail counters. I would characterize that as pretty anecdotal myself, but I want to open it up for a quick audience participation. What might you think the issue with relying heavily on trail counters to characterize the economic impact of cycling and trails in terms of their economic and health impacts?
Not everyone rides on trails.
Yes. What else? This is really good, Amy, because a lot of the answers that I sometimes get, like, well, there's animals could trip the wire, and I'm just thinking, oh, that's not the right answer. And I kind of have to not
Probably got
what
walkers
else?
in there.
Well, people could be riding their bike across it twice, and I'm like, yeah, okay, because if you think about it, right, you're exactly on the money here. Even if you take the most well-attended trail in the state, which is the Raccoon River Valley Trail, it has over 350,000 unique individual users each year. That still is not the totality of the entire county or area, the region, right? And because there's the mountain bike riders, the single track riders, the gravel riders, the road bike riders who will never touch that trail. Or maybe they ride kind of a variety of those things and are not counted. So what our study did that was an improvement and enhancement, the biggest structural improvement in the design, was to go away from trail counters and to use federally available data and also peer-reviewed academic data as well. So that is a big difference. So in transforming the kind of project and taking it to the next evolutionary stage of what this project can do, instead of $4,000 for some capstone students, which I'm not knocking because I've been a capstone student myself, but you do get what you pay for, right? We found some fundamental flaws in the design, and so we're now well over $60,000 for this. So it is leagues ahead of the original study. It was great for its time, but a lot has changed, and so we've decided to change the way we did the study as well. What is the value proposition of this study? So first and foremost, in talking with IDA, up until 2 weeks before this study was published back on the end of January, they were still receiving grant applications for Destination Iowa, for TAP grants, for CAT grants, for all these different grants that cited the original study. So the shelf life of this thing, pretty good, right? Almost 12 years, even despite some of the fundamental flaws that I pointed out already. And so we know there is inherent value of this project. It was important for us to renew it. And especially because there was an opportunity to show that value to communities. And I think one of the other big things that IDA, really emphasized in signing on to this thing, I think within 3 business days, Debbie Durham herself signed off on a $5,000 sponsorship for the study, because they said, well, we want this study to be better, and we want it to have more localized information so that individual communities, towns, counties can get more unique data that would help tell the story. And so for us, that's a vehicle for advocacy, the advocacy work that we do. That's our bread and butter. So in this case, advocating not only for trails, but for local cities, counties, all of that. But to then tell the whole story of the statewide impact that's happening, what I think is a pretty profound story, to lawmakers and policymakers and decision makers in the legislature to say, this is why it's so important that we do the work that we do. When it comes to trails, cycling, and everything that relates to it. And then in doing that, there's an opportunity to have a collective impact. I think if we, with one voice, stand up with all the bike shops, without all the county conservation boards, with all of the bike friendly, with all of the individual cyclists and trail users, who are not all cyclists. Some of them are runners, some of them are hikers or walkers, and all of these different, the trail associations, right? The bike clubs. There's over 70 trail associations in the state. We mapped all of that out. There's over, 80 brick and mortar bike shops. We mapped all that out in the process of doing this, and we engaged them proactively in the course of this. So that's what collective impact is all about, is stringing together that tapestry and telling that profound story in an impactful way that's going to resonate. And I think that kind of culminated in being invited to present this by Senator Lofgren, who was our bill runner for hands-free, to his subcommittee on appropriations for economic development, and presented this study to lawmakers formally at his request. So I think that's the kind of impact that we want to have, is to have a seat at the table. And to be able to get that message out there. And then finally, for us, being able to support bike safety policies, of course, is the nuts and bolts of who the coalition is. Study structure and overview, I'm not going to go through line by line here, but let's just say it's more robust than the original. I'll just particularly note, we did a series of case studies. One of the other criticisms you could say on the flip side of like IEDA saying we want more localized data. So it was kind of this one statewide version. It was not localized. There's no regional analysis. We did that here. There was no case studies to illustrate, small, medium, large communities have this impact at scale. We did that here to kind of inoculate against that criticism, because you could say, oh, well, that's just Des Moines, that's just Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, that's not Mineola, Iowa, or whatnot. So we did our due diligence with making sure that we expanded that, improved upon the original, and provided that storytelling for any community of any size in Iowa was experiencing this at scale. So who were the partners and sponsors that came together to support this? We couldn't fit all of the logos on the slide. At a certain point, it was like, okay, we can't fit any more logos on here, but over 50 partners, funders, and sponsors. Everything from my Tall Dog Bike Club that chipped in $500 to IEDA, which I mentioned, and then 7 different county conservation boards, each of which chipped in $5,000 for this thing, because they saw the value that we're talking about here today. And this is what coalitions look like. It's diverse, it's representative of the communities, and then it's also showing the impact with breadth and depth that I think is impressive to even maybe some of the detractors that we might encounter. So what were the study data and sources that we used? I mentioned federal data specifically. Yes, we did do a survey of the bicyclists and other trail users, which we used to establish kind of a baseline for spending. But other than that, we use Census Bureau data, Bureau of Economic Analysis data, CDC data for the health section. People for Bikes does a fantastic job as well, and other peer-reviewed academic literature. So there's a variety of much more robust and reliable sources. The survey that I mentioned, so again, the survey, which folks could essentially, if you're a trail user of any kind, like a cyclist, could go in and fill out, how much, time do you spend biking and how much money do you spend while you're doing that, is essentially what the survey boiled down to. The original study had about 300 responses total. Well, we blew that out of the water. 2,700 responses from, 94 of 99 counties. We really tried to get all 99. 60 businesses, 60 clubs and organizations, and 50 government officials, which means like the DOT, county conservation boards, cities, counties, things like that. So we established benchmarks for these things and just absolutely blew it out of the water. So we feel that the baseline of spending that's estimated throughout the entire project is credible, robust, and well positioned. What is the recreational riding impact? So this is an apples to apples comparison in the analysis of the original. So I mentioned the original study in 2012 said that the statewide impact of cycling and trails at the time was 364.9 million. So that apples to apples comparison, again, recreational riding impacts, that would be 1.4 billion this time. And that's coming from 900,000 people who ride a bike. That's 1 in 3 Iowans who ride a bike at some point during the year. And that might mean they ride a bike one time. That might mean they ride a bike 5 times per week. But we were able to holistically capture that totality that we're talking about. This means all the gravel riders, all of the mountain bike riders, all the single track users, all of the different types of riders, the road bike users, those who come in for RAGBRAI. So this is the RAGBRAI, or sorry, this is the a lot of folks who come in from out of town, those 900,000, that does not include those. These are Iowans who are making this impact. That's 1 in 3 Iowans. That's significant. Oops, I think I went backwards instead of forwards. That's my fault. I have to back out and go back in. There we go. Cycling is a top 50 industry in Iowa. So we actually went to the trouble of breaking down the GDP of cycling trails, given that 1.4 billion and all the other industries. And that means that cycling and trails is a top industry in Iowa in the top 50. We are also the world capital of trails. So we're actively using this moniker in partnership with IDA to market Iowa as a great place to live, work, and play. Leaning into this strength, something that, you know, we are already known for to a certain extent regionally, but we want to use this internationally as a reason to bring businesses, attract talent, and to just generally work on the quality of life things that we need to project outside of the state to the region, to the country, and to the entire world, that this is why you should come to Iowa. This is why you should come live, work, play, relocate your business here. This picture here is a ribbon cutting from the Perry to Woodward Connector Trail that I led the ride at, that had over 500 people show up to it. And the significance of that was that it unlocked the largest paved loop in the entire country, as far as we know, the world, 123 miles unbroken, that connected the two largest trail networks and trails in the state, the Trestle Trail and the Raccoon River Valley Trail. So that connector trail, you know, what I said at the ribbon cutting for that is that, you know, this shows that a trail is greater than the sum of its parts. It's not just a couple of inches of concrete, but it's about the stories that we tell about ourselves and the memories that we're going to create for the next 100 years, because I believe that this trail and the trails that it connects will be here 100 years from today. And that's what a legacy for future generations looks like. And we're creating that today. And I think that's something that is significant. And I think that story needs to be told and retold for us to build that image of ourselves that we need to project to the rest of the country and world, so that we can make Iowa a more attractive place for talent. 900,000 Iowans who ride a bike annually. So the breakdown here, we went to urban, suburban, small town, rural, but also the type of rider. So this is a very interesting takeaway from the overall study that I thought was intriguing. So you'll look at, you know, the blue there is the occasional rider. That's someone who bikes 1 to 5 times per year. Moderate would be a handful of times per month, and committed would be your, you know, commuter, somebody or someone who's training for RAGBRAI, someone who's biking 3 to 5 times per week. But you'll notice that the commonality, the common denominator between any type of you know, setting, the geography there, is the occasional rider makes up the bulk of all ridership across. It cuts across all different types, whether you're urban, suburban, small town, or rural. And the takeaway there is that this is an opportunity, right? So everybody who thinks of cyclists thinks of the person in spandex who I'm sure shows up at city council meetings occasionally, or who does RAGBRAI, is all over social media talking about how excited they are to be a cyclist. And that's great. But that's not the actual numbers when you're talking about the impact. The biggest impact is coming from those who are occasional riders. And why is that significant? Because this is where you can really move the needle as a community. Why is it so important that you establish bike lanes on Aurora Avenue? Well, the significance is not about making it easier for people who are biking already 3 to 5 times per week. It's about moving the needle on that margin, about the 1 to 2% of those occasional riders who then become moderate or committed, because that's where the biggest piece of the pie is available for towns and communities to get their slice of the economic impact, that 1.4 billion. If you want more of that spending to come to your community, which I think we are nowhere near the ceiling of that untapped potential in terms of economic impact, that's where the margins are. You put in some bike lanes, you make it easier, you put in some bike racks for folks, you become more bike friendly as a community, as a city. That occasional ridership can then move up the ladder to become more moderate. And it is that easy that you move the margin to 1 or 2% by putting in those amenities like you're doing. I think that's going to show some increasing dividends. And so that's the takeaway I had when looking at this, is that, you know, everybody thinks of the RAGBRAI or whatever, and that's really just not the totality of it. RAGBRAI is actually not even close to this. They have at most 20,000 riders. Well, there's another 900,000 Iowans every year who are biking. So the biggest impact is coming from those folks who are just picking up a bike and getting out there and maybe going to a bar once. On that slide, I spend way too much time on that slide because I love it. But that committed recreational rider spends $3,900 on biking per year, and the casual rider spends $900. So why is it so important that we add those amenities to increase that ridership's potential to grow in the economy in that context? Well, because the committed rider who bikes 3 to 5 times per week spends $3,900 per year, while the casual rider, which is there's more volume there, spends $900. So if you can just move them, a few of them, 1 to 2%, you're talking about a lot of economic potential there. Here's the economic impact by industry. Of course, it's retail trade, bars, restaurants, things like that. 21,000 jobs statewide are supported by cycling. I had I won't mention who this was or what board they were on, but I had a board member of a county conservation board tell me, well, I went and you told me there were 80 bike shops, and then it just doesn't really seem mathematically plausible that, you know, if you take 21,000 divided by 80, that I don't really think there's that many people working at bike shops. And I said, well, that's because that's not the statistic or statistics. You know, this is across all industries, right? So this, because of the existence of the spending that's happening by those 900,000 riders, the jobs that are supported by that. Yes, there are bike shops, of course, and yes, there are other, you know, bike types of industries like Shields, which is more than just a bike shop. But you've also got all the bars and restaurants and retail trade industries that are being supported by that. That if that spending wasn't happening, there would not be those jobs in the economy. So a more holistic approach there. Economic impact. So this is where the RAGBRAI is kind of taken into account, because, you know, the vast majority of those folks are coming in from out of state. So this is, we worked with IEDA on this and localized some of the state data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And so this is some of those statistics. Sorry that I had a picture of Ankeny there, not Urbandale. I should swap that out. Bike retailers and shop industry. So yeah, this is your bike shops. You know, this is core to bike shops. Economic impact there is 56 million. Like I mentioned, there's, you know, upwards of 80 brick and mortar bike shops in Iowa. This is clubs and organizations, 7.1 million in quantified volunteer hours. So there's just a robust and diverse culture of bike clubs and organizations, trail associations in the state of Iowa. We looked at volunteer hours, you know, contributed to the economy by those organizations. Community and climate impact. So a whole other section of the study that we added that is a new feature compared to the original. We looked at this. So obviously it goes without saying, but cyclists who are commuting are not emitting pollutants into the atmosphere. 1,500 tons of carbon emissions prevented. This is where a bigger opportunity exists. If we can get more people to move up to that opportunity of being a bike commuter, that's going to help, you know, improve not just the economy, but also our climate. You know, there's 4,800 Iowans who regularly ride a bike, kind of broken down by region there. This is how much time or how many days per week they commute by bike. They spend less on their mode of transportation by far than they do on a car. So especially friendly to those folks who you know, don't have access to other forms of transportation. We did some regional analysis. Again, another new feature. I'll kind of cruise through this here, but for our region here, you've got economic impact of 420 million in the region. This is the MPO region, so all the counties within the MPO is what this region was. Des Moines area has 250,000 cyclists. I'm kind of broken down by that. I'm going to go through here for cruising through not our region. We looked at each one of these regions. Bicycle commuter. So you remember the very casual rider spends 900 per year. Bike commuter, 4,700. So another good reason to add those bike lanes, right? Those folks are spending way more money in the economy than your casual riders who don't have as much access to bike-friendly amenities like bike lanes. Health impacts of cycling. So this was something that was included in the original, but we certainly expanded and augmented this area. This was the big headline catcher, other than the 1.4 billion, a 49% number as far as basically those who are your bike commuters, those biking 3 to 5 times per week. That number is coming straight out of U.S. Census data for Iowa. 49% less likely to have poor mental health. I just want to pause on that point. because I think it's so significant. That means there's 5,400 fewer Iowans experiencing poor mental health annually in Iowa because of the work that you are doing, because of the work that all the county conservation boards are doing, and all of that collective impact story that's being told. This is one of the major outcomes, I think. This is something for me personally that speaks to me. That's why I use the trails. I know anecdotally when I go out and I, go into the trails and I experience that, I just feel so much healthier mentally. But we wanted to quantify that. And so this was something that I think really pushed the envelope as far as, what we could look at with mental health, because this same number is coming straight out of census data, as well as the number of riders and how often they ride. It's all coming from the same data set, that's Census Bureau data. But nobody had actually done this analysis of, if you look at the number of riders in a community and their reported mental health, they had basically asked folks, how many days do you feel poor mental health per month? And then how often do you ride, as separate questions? And we did that cross analysis. So this is new, unique analysis we did for this study. And I thought it was very significant because it's a cost-effective intervention, right, to provide these amenities. So it's more than just an amenity. It's not like you're putting in a pool. I think sure, pools might have a mental health impact, but not like this. A 50% reduction in anything is significant. Active cycling decreases breast cancer by 28%. Cycling results in 9,000 fewer Iowans with obesity. 77% less likely to have colorectal cancer. 25% less likely to have diabetes. 77% less likely, I already did that one, sorry. Reduces high blood pressure and stroke, so 1,200 fewer cases, of high blood pressure and stroke in Iowa because of cycling trails. So just to kind of like put an end cap on that is, the health impacts alone are such a high ROI, right? And so I think when we're looking at these investments, I think, rather than go and try to, which is how they designed this study, fix those things with a procedure, like going to the hospital for a stroke or the high blood pressure, you have these trails and you have these bike amenities that are producing these outcomes. And in a preventative sense, it's so much more cost effective than if you allowed for a community to have those incidents, those cases, and then having to seek medical attention or a procedure for those things. So we also did a series of case studies. We did Jefferson, Decorah, Marshalltown, Mason City, and the towns along the Wabash Trace Nature Trail to provide kind of a nice array of different sizes of communities. Again, the criticism is like, well, that's just Des Moines or Iowa City, and you could certainly make that criticism. But the fact is that Jefferson, Iowa is not, Des Moines, that's not Iowa City, and the impact is clear. It's there. It's at scale, but it's certainly there. Mineola, Iowa, for example, a town along the Wabash, that's a small town, but they see significant impact from the bike, from the trail, from the bike community, vegan bike community.
Luke, I think you just said it there, but the Wabash Nature Trail, you keep talking, that's in Mineola, and I apologize as a lifelong Iowan. I'm not real sure where Mineola
That is okay. That is a-okay. I actually grew up somewhat near there in a little town called Thurman, so I can totally understand, because most people have not heard of Thurman. But so it starts.
Whereabouts?
Yeah, so the Wabash starts in Council Bluffs and it ends in a little town named Blanchard, which is a town of 50, which is right after Coyne. And most people have heard of Coyne, but not Blanchard. Some of the other towns along the trail include Shenandoah and Malvern, those kind of areas. Was
so
that more?
Southwest Iowa.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yep. Sorry, I should have said that. I guess for me, the Wabash is so central to who I am as a person. It's actually my favorite bike trail in the whole state. Simply because on my mother's side of the family, the Wabash, trail starts in Council Bluffs. Like I said, my grandmother on my mom's side lives still to this day in a town she's lived in for over 50 years in Council Bluffs. And then my grandfather, who passed away a year ago, he lived in the small town of Blanchard, the town of 50 at the very end of the trail. So I had family on both sides of the trail. So it's a unique trail. It's a crushed limestone with tree canopy going through the whole thing, and some really awesome bridges and just some great history there. So, and a variety of just awesome Iowa towns. So that's a fun trail. Thank you for asking. Bike safety. So just go through this piece here. So I mentioned bike safety is kind of the nuts and bolts of who we are. So in conjunction with us releasing this study, every 2 years, the League of American Bicyclists, of which we're an affiliate, releases their report card for Iowa. So where are we doing well? We're doing great in funding and infrastructure, but counterbalancing that in a negative way is our policies. So until just this year, a lack of a hands-free law, protections for pedestrians and crosswalks, just an overall kind of lagging behind the rest of the country in bike safety policies and laws, was really handicapping us. So it's kind of a tale of two states, right? So where you have the state that is home to the largest, longest running bike ride, RAGBRAI, the state that has a 1.4 billion economic impact and the most, the world capital of trails. On the other hand, we rank just dead middle of the pack as far as our overall ranking, 24 in the nation. We're not even the best in the Midwest. So lots of room for improvement, and that is because of bike safety. So this is where the coalition, this is who we are. We want to help get bike safety passed. So in that area is why it's so important that we got hands-free passed, and we got the crosswalk bill passed last year, and we want to get a safe passing law passed as one of the final kind of patchwork, filling in those gaps to get us caught back up to speed in that area for context. So this was the crosswalk bill that we signed, basically protecting all pedestrians, regardless of your form of transportation, whether you're on a bike, a wheelchair, stroller, scooter, other mobility device. Got that signed into law last year, and then hands-free signed into law this year. So that really helped get us kind of caught up. We are still one of 6 states that does not have a safe passing law. And that is the number one reason where cyclists will get killed, is because of passing too closely. So that is the final kind of hurdle that we are faced with. And we're going to pursue that again in the next coming legislative session. So we're going to try to get a trifecta here. If we can get 1, 2, 3 done year over year, I think we're going to be in a much better place. And that is, thanks to all of our members and partners like you to help lift us up so that we can do the work that we need to do. We've launched a Safe Roads Iowa campaign, an educational campaign to educate folks on not just the crosswalk, but the hands-free law. And so that's something that, y'all can sign on to support that. That would be really significant as an action you can take to say that we support this. We want to organize a new coalition around that, broader than just the Undistracted Driving Coalition that operated within the context of the legislature to get hands-free passed. So we invite you to join that. That'll be an ongoing program where we work with, for example, law enforcement to do workshops and things like that to educate Iowans on, how they can be part of the solution to end distracted driving. Partnership opportunities here. We already, had Bike to Work Week here recently. That's always fun to celebrate. Thank you for the proclamation that y'all did to help lift that up. Our Safe Routes to School program, I think we talked about that a little bit when I was out there, but of course that's an ongoing program that we've done for 17 years in partnership with the DOT. And as part of that, we have Walk, Bike, Roll, and just really happy, just over the moon about this, but we just got word recently, and we got a lot of news around this, that our program here in Iowa, we had 132 participating schools, which got us ranked per capita 5th in the country. We edged out California and Minnesota, and that's a big deal. And so, it's per capita. So for us to be able to do that, I think is really significant, especially in a voluntary program like that. So that's statewide. That's something that we're doing through that Safe Routes program. I think that is really significant. We want to build on that success. So anything we can do to especially get, engaged in your elementary schools, I think that would be a value add for us to build a work with you. We do our Bike Expo and Banquet on the 24th at the Iowa Event Center. You'll be welcome to be a vendor at that if you so choose. The Great American Rail Trail goes through all of Iowa. It's a coast-to-coast trail. Goes through, as you can see, kind of that central Iowa area. It would start in Davenport area and end in Council Bluffs, and we're about 55% of the way done with the whole trail. So that's something that we work with Rails to Trails Conservancy on, one of our national partners. We have our Community Action Sports Complex that we are still in the process of selecting a site for. And we did get our first major gift for the capital campaign from the Polk County Board of Supervisors. So thanks to them for signing on to support that project. And that's going to be an ongoing kind of icon level project to bring an Olympic grade year-round facility here to the greater Des Moines area.
Luke,
And then
I've never heard anything about that. project.
Sure, I'll go back here.
Could you, you alluded to what it was, but what sort of facility needs are there?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for the question.
for
So
that?
some context there. I guess the very short answer to your question, facility needs, what we know right now is it's 150,000 square feet is the footprint of the project. So it is a massive project. Separate to this study and in tandem to this study, because I don't know, I'm kind of crazy because we did these two studies at the exact same time. It was a heavy lift, but we did the feasibility study for this project at the exact same time we were doing this study. So they're two separate studies, but it is, you know, an 80+ page report in and of itself. And we have identified, I think it was 7 sites within that. Our number one option site was Merle Hay on the list. And we have since struck that from the list after engaging with Liz Holland over there, and just the feasibility of the 150,000 square foot footprint at Merle Hay was not a feasible thing. So we've eliminated that from the list, unfortunately. Hate to say it, because I did push really hard for that one. But some of the facility needs, like I said, are that large square footage. We looked at other places like Valley West and Southridge and the Dyko site down in downtown Des Moines, and then a variety of other places in West Des Moines. But it is currently an open conversation and something that I'd be happy to engage with you all further from this too. But I think it's going to be a massive impact, you know, just to describe it a little bit. So this would be a one of a kind in the entire country project. You know, there are other facilities like up in Minnesota called Rum River that have the kind of biking features, but they don't have, this will have skate, mountain bike, and BMX, and it'll all be under one roof essentially. And so that would make it one of a kind. That's why CSL International did our feasibility study. And because it was just a unique project idea. And so they had the same feasibility study partner that did the soccer stadium, for example. And so they're an internationally acclaimed sports tourism agency. So I can send that as a follow-up, that feasibility study as a follow-up, just for context. Did that help answer your question? Let me take that as a yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And I'm disappointed that, you know, Merle Hay has been removed from the list, but, you know, maybe there's somewhere else in Urbandale. And hey, I'm the only non-cycling council member, so I don't know why I'm the only one advocating and asking questions.
Well, I'll tell you,
It's because the rest of us have already paid attention to this stuff.
Oh, burn.
Well, and I'll tell you, and I think I've exchanged emails, you know, with Pat about this too. And what it came down to for Liz was the site that we had initially identified at Merle Hay. It included some space that has to be reserved for retail, and there's just no way around that. You know, there's like this area in the line of sight for Kohl's, and it has to be reserved for retail, is what Liz told us. So initially, our feasibility study partners were saying, well, hey, it could like go here in the sense that like there's 150,000 square feet here, but you know, that space was specifically retail oriented, and so there's just no way around that for Liz. And so try as we might, it wasn't something that was going to be functional. So open to other sites. If y'all had, you know, propositions to kind of substitute that out, I'd be happy to look at that. And CSL has said, you know, if there's another proposed site in the area that we could take a look at, I'd be happy to have them evaluate it.
Yeah, so where do we have 3.5 acres, Aaron?
Yeah. You know, the reason why it ranked so highly, of course, it almost goes without saying, but being in that population center of the overall metro, y'all are that sweet spot. I mean, if I really could put it out in your area, I think it would be the most functional thing to do from a business plan perspective, because part of the business plan is predicated on increased, you know, membership of 8035, which is our partner that originally came to us with this idea. They're the BMX club. You know, and they operate off of the south side right now, and they have like a, you know, outdoor track. The problem with an outdoor track is when it rains, you know, the trail is what they have there is called a pump track, right? It just all disintegrates. Or they have people come in there using motorbikes on the track and it destroys it and then they have to rebuild it. And this is happening constantly. So obviously the value of an indoor year round, you have a more controlled environment. You could grow membership much more sustainably. And while we could potentially do it on the south side, it's just much easier to expand membership and usership if it's centrally located. But wherever it goes, I think it's going to be a huge gem of a project and would bring out people internationally. We work with USA BMX on this, and part of their contract of promoting this would be within the first 3 years of construction, they would guarantee that nationals would be hosted there, which is like $1 million a day impact. So it's a high quality project, and I would characterize it as icon level impact. So something to think about. Yeah, happy to take proposals for other sites if you have them.
One quick question, that 150,000 square feet or roughly 3.5 acres, does that include like everything? Is that all the parking, or is that like just this facility itself?
Great question. That is just the facility. That's not even parking.
I'm afraid you're gonna tell me that. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that piece could be finagled a little bit, maybe. So for example, you know Pat with RDG. Obviously, you know Pat, right? Pat Dunn.
Oh yeah.
So he's on our planning committee for this, and one of his things that he's done is do like a site analysis for like that exact question, like, you know, functionality of like parking. So he's really kind of our master and commander with that kind of piece where he's able to do that RDG level analysis of, okay, so if the site was here, where would parking be and how would that function? So I think that could be creatively addressed, so to speak, but I think the must have is the 150,000, at least in the currently proposed version. So not to say that that couldn't change, you know, down the course, but I think that's roughly what we're looking at.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions before I move on? And I can send this as a follow-up as well in addition to this study. So yeah, we did these 2 studies simultaneously. I don't know what I was thinking. It was a lot, but it produced some good product. So we're now in phase 2 of this project, the Economic and Health Impacts of Cycling and Trail Study, which we call the 99 county version. The U.S. Department of Transportation through the Iowa Department of Transportation has provided a $25,000 grant to fund this. And so we're now in the process of doing this same analysis for all 99 counties, which is just evolutionarily of the project. You know, the original study was basically one analysis for the whole state, which again, impactful, but not nearly as impactful as doing that same analysis 99 times for each county. So each county is going to get their own personalized results, which they can use again for those CAT grants, those Destination Iowa grants, the TAC grants, all that stuff. So I think that is going to really help us move leaps and bounds ahead of where we were as far as the quality of information, data, and resources and tools that especially county conservation boards, but cities certainly can when you're pursuing those things. And we want to be a partner with you lockstep. So if you have projects, you know, I just wrote a letter of support for a project over in Ankeny. So hit me up for a letter of support. You know, anytime you need it, we'll turn that around for you in 24 to 48 hours. So just let us know what your plans are for those grants. If you're pursuing a big grant, the IADA wants to see this study cited because they paid for it and because they think it's good information. So we'd be happy to partner with you in that and write letters of support as relevant to your work. We do our summer bike ride series. I won't spend too much time on that because I'm going to try to wrap it up here. You can become an individual member of the Bike Coalition anytime you choose on our website. And then you can check out the full study online. And I'd be happy to take any other questions you might have.
Yeah, hi, Luke. You had referred earlier to a crosswalk law. What were you referring to? I'm familiar with the hands-free legislation, but what was the legislation?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So just for context, our policy priorities, we have, I think, 5 or 6 policy priorities longstanding. And number 1 was always hands-free for the last 7 to 10 years. Number 2 was this crosswalks bill. And then we have something called standardizing penalties, which would mean like you hit a bicyclist or you hit someone in a car, the penalty should be the same. And then, you know, you've got like I will on there. And I think that's pretty much like our policy priorities and context. So this was our number 2 policy priority. Really what it boiled down to was, the way we characterized it, at least when we're trying to get past in the legislature, was a code fix. So the definition of a pedestrian and a crosswalk, right? So why does that matter? It's because, when you're a pedestrian in a crosswalk, a foot, one word, a car has to yield to you. But the gap in the code was if you were on any other kind of mobility device, because of the definition of pedestrian, technically cars and practically cars did not have to yield to you, or certainly if they didn't, you couldn't charge them in a court of law and prosecute them when they did hit pedestrians who were on a bicycle or in a wheelchair, or on a scooter, or when this actually happened. I talked to Tiffany, the new CEO of the chamber, and she told me a story of a friend who's an Iowan who was pushing a stroller, mother pushing a baby in a stroller through a crosswalk, car hits stroller goes airborne somehow by an act of God. The baby is fine and the stroller lands. And I don't know, great design by the stroller company, but it didn't get charged. No charge, because it's not illegal to hit a stroller in a crosswalk, because they're not a pedestrian. Right. So that's the gap in the code. So that's why it was so important for us, because cyclists obviously fall into that same gap category. So what this bill did was and also there was a patchwork of like some cities would have an ordinance that covered this. I mean, there was like, don't quote me on this, like 13 cities in Iowa that had an ordinance, but the vast majority didn't. So there's a patchwork of protections. And so you're in one place and another, and you don't know what your protections are and how safe you need to be as a pedestrian. So the significance of this law was that close the gap, establish a statewide protocol that regardless of your form of transportation or mobility device, cars must yield to pedestrians and crosswalks, protecting everybody.
So I'm sorry, has that been enacted then?
That was passed last year. Yes.
Good. Well, and let me just tell you, Luke, I appreciate that on several levels. I've handled several bike and crosswalk accident cases, and you're right that they don't charge. You don't get a ticket for that. You can still establish civil liability for that. However, this will make it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had to argue that as a practical matter, a cyclist is a pedestrian in the crosswalk, and there's some support for that. And there's some support for that in the common law, but having a statute out there is just it's a godsend. So I appreciate that. And even if that wasn't the kind of work that I do as a cyclist, I just think that this is all safer and frankly makes motorists accountable.
Well, thank you for that, Councilman. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, right back at you, because thank you for the work that you're doing, trying to advocate for folks who have been impacted by this. We just want to provide that framework for you to be able to do the work that you do, day in and day out. So I think, it's one of those things. It was funny to me because when we were trying to pass the bill, we were like, it's just a code fix. We're just changing a definition, guys, is all we want to do here. And then when it passed, we're like, this is a big win. This is a great win. This is a massive win for all pedestrians. Trying to say, oh, that's just this tiny change, but tiny changes in the law, as you know, Joe, it can be really impactful. So
it's huge. Luke,
fixes.
Also, I'm just wondering, do you have a handle on about how many of your members reside in Urbandale?
I do actually. I know. I'd have to pull that number, but yeah, we are using that for action alerts about the bike lanes. I don't quote me off the top of my head. The number that comes to mind was like between 600 and 800, something like that. But I have the list. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, a significant density of our membership base is kind of, as you might expect, in the greater Des Moines area, and then in the Iowa City area where we're based. Yeah. Other questions?
I had one about
Luke,
the safe road.
I had go ahead, somebody.
Yeah, I had a question about the Safe Roads Iowa campaign. So you had talked about the educational campaign for the hands-free law. What kind of aspects does that campaign contain? Like, is that like just webinars, or is that like a fully fleshed out type of on-site thing?
Great question. So I think there's two answers to that. First of all, so this is a brand new program that we have not deployed yet. So in the sense that it hasn't been deployed, it's not fleshed out in that sense. So I still think there's some fleshing out to be done. But the broad strokes of it, my second answer would be, there are 4 key components to this program. And so it's one element packaging together existing programs and another element of building new programs or elements of a program. So the 4 components are, you got our existing longstanding Safe Routes to School, which, is a longstanding program, but not everybody still to this day knows about it. So making sure everybody knows about Safe Routes to School and Walk, Bike, Roll and all of those great things that we've been doing for a long time. And then there's another component of like kind of a PSA campaign. So public messaging, social media, all your regular mediums that you communicate with the general public to about the change from not only crosswalk but hands-free and how you can be part of the solution to help end distracted driving, and doing that in the period of time between July 1st when the law takes effect with the fiscal year of the state, and then January 1st when they begin to issue tickets. So that's where that PSA campaign would be, and that's a new element. And then you've got other elements like working with law enforcement, which we do for our Safe Routes program, but this would be in a new way to build out workshops to help educate the general public and also work specifically with law enforcement agencies, especially local law enforcement agencies like yours, to say, here are some of the things from the coalition's perspective about what you can do in these certain situations. So for example, let's say somebody is driving distracted, but it's not due to cell phone. Well, you can charge them with reckless driving. Polk County PD does that PD in Polk County does that all the time, but not every police department in the state is doing that. So emphasizing that there is coverage for all sorts of distracted driving issues, and then just how to better enforce some of the hands-free laws and things like that, and then educating the general public on again how they can be part of that solution and not the problem. It can be really simple, like using a phone mount instead of holding the phone in your hand, things like that. And then I'm forgetting the 4th component because it's been a day already. Does that help answer some of your questions?
Yeah, that does. That is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So where your city can come into this is, of course, we'd love to work with any of your schools, as we have been, your law enforcement agency on that kind of workshop type of stuff, and getting the message out there in a unified way is really the crux of the entire program, so that there's consistent messaging, whether you're in Polk County, or in Urbandale, or whether you're on the other side of the state, that especially law enforcement is communicating effectively, I think, using social media, really that same message about, phone down, heads up. If I had to boil it down to a quick, catchy phrase, phone down, heads up. I think that's the kind of message that we want to get out there. And then it's just about the way that people can do that effectively as a vehicle user.
Yeah, because I've seen some posts from our PD page on the new law.
Great.
I just don't know how connected that is to the program that you guys are doing and how that aligns and everything. So that might be something worthwhile for us to keep in mind.
Good. Yeah, I think it's really just about hooking that to the program, because the messaging is there, and then how do we create a vehicle, so to speak, with this program with all the other law enforcement agencies statewide to have that unified messaging, especially around the key dates of July 1st and January 1st. Those are the critical junctures. So more to come on that soon. We're still fleshing it out, like I said. Great question.
I've got a question for you, Luke. I'm wondering about e-bikes, what you are seeing in terms of their impact on both kinds of the results of your study potentially, but also safety. I know we've been kind of looking at some level of a trail ordinance that would limit miles per hour from vehicles that like scooters and e-bikes. And I'm just wondering about all of those things related to that electrification of our wheels.
Yeah. Here, I'll stop sharing my screen here. Did somebody have something, or is that just kind of background? So the answer to that question, Pat, it's actually very interesting, because we had somebody from the Quad Cities Bike Club reach out. This is probably the most common question I get, like, period, across the board. in any public presentation is, what about e-bikes? And so I have a couple of answers there, and it's usually about safety, right? And so the issue is, people on e-bikes, especially those that are non-pedal assist, are speeding and creating safety concerns on our trails, and should they even be allowed on the trails? Well, our position, our disposition to that is, if it's not pedal assist, it shouldn't be on the trail. Motorbike and not a bicycle, because if you're not pedaling it, then it's not a bike by definition. And that kind of fits within the framework of the e-bike, class 1, class 2, class 3. Encourage you to take local action on this for sure, and putting in kind of a speed limit. I think you can do that. I don't know how functional, how enforceable, I should say. Like, I don't know who's out there with us with a speed camera clocking a e-bike, and how you can get that person a ticket and they're just going to speed away. And how do you know who it is? I don't know. It's difficult because the enforcement of it is really tricky. That all being said, we actually have a bill in the legislature that would help clarify some of this statewide. And so I can share some of that in a follow-up, what that bill is, and you can look at some of the ways that we're trying to address that at a statewide level, but certainly encourage you to do it, to also address it. Locally, it's just, I worry about how, do we have a solution, but is it functional? Is it feasible to enforce that? And I don't know is the short answer, because it's difficult, and I just don't know how you can enforce a speed limit on a trail. Like, how you can get that penalty enforced, basically. I don't know. Oh, you're on mute there, Pat. Sorry.
Sorry.
Luke, I had a couple of questions. This is Bridget. I know when you gave your presentation to the council meeting, you talked, and you had it in your slide there, about the bike to school program. And I think that is something that I'd love to see Urbandale, with all of its school districts and elementary schools, figure out how we can participate in. I don't know who needs to start that conversation. I mean, I live in the path of an elementary school, and there's so many walkers, bikers, strollers. Would just love to see some coordination and safety, and because we got a lot of unsafe situations as well. And that my other question is, I have no idea who operates it, but I'd love to have some discussion about, since I'm not a cyclist and I don't have a bike, creating a B-cycle location, maybe in Walker Johnson Park. And maybe I'm crazy to suggest that, but I know you have them in Clive. I think they're at the Aquatic Center. I think Walker Johnson might be another location to consider. And I have no idea if that's something that you guys run or who runs it, but.
Great question. Yeah. So the Street Collective, so the way I would frame this here, this is helpful because we often get confused. I actually went on a DC fly-in trip where I got put down as the Street Collective. Like, oh, you're the Street Collective. I was like, well, so we're like the statewide version of the Street Collective is the most basic way I can put it. So they're a partner of ours, but we are to the League of American Bicyclists what the Street Collective is to the Bicycle Coalition, right? So we're an affiliate partner. So kind of a loose membership structure where, Jeremy Lewis, who's the executive director of the Street Collective, good friend of mine, he does that work with the B-cycle stations. But what I can do is, we're a coalition-based organization, so I'm happy to, as a follow-up to this conversation, get him a note and recommend that to him and see what he says and get you guys connected with the person who handles the B-cycles specifically. So yeah, happy to bring that recommendation along.
Yeah, I think that had been discussed previously, Luke, at some point. I'm not sure where they left it, but I think we did express interest in doing that somewhere, either by our library or Austin. So
yeah. Well, I know Jeremy was following the bike lane thing closely. He just couldn't attend. He was on my short list to bring out there too, but he had another obligation. So happy to follow up with him and see where that stands. So good stuff.
Luke,
and then what do we need to do for the bike school thing?
Yes. Yep.
Sorry,
so Matt
for the
Berkey
descriptive
is
words.
Yeah. Matt Berkey is our full-time program director. He's the person who manages that. It's a federally funded grant, so he is 100% dedicated to that program. And this is so, and he's like covering the statewide, has statewide coverage for this program. So I'd be happy to connect you with him as a follow-up to this meeting and make sure that you get in touch with him. The vast majority of those 132 participating schools for the Walk Bike Roll Day came outside of the Des Moines Metro. So we are really trying an honest effort to get into the Des Moines Metro. And so this would be super helpful to get elementary schools in Urbandale online for that program, and then just generally safe routes to school.
Luke, let's connect outside of this meeting. I can give you some contacts of who I know are doing that already locally.
Great.
in the
Yeah,
metro.
some of this is just connecting those dots,
Yep.
to the statewide entity that we represent. So I think that's really great. Cool.
Look, I wanted to circle back real quick to a question that Pat had about speed limits on trails, regardless of whether it's enforceable or not. Is there any kind of national standard as to what a speed limit on a shared trail ought to be?
Not aware of any national standard or statewide for that matter. Not that I'm aware.
If you had to, take a stab, at least I live near the North Walnut Creek Trail, which I believe Urbandale did a survey a few years back that showed that was the most used trail by walkers in the city.
Which one?
North Walnut Creek.
North Walnut. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
And it is heavily used, by walkers. And so I've often wondered there. I see cyclists coming through there, 20 miles an hour, which is too dangerous for that particular trail. And I've often wondered what would be the appropriate limit, but
Yeah. If I'm throwing a number at a dartboard right now, I think 20 plus is unsafe. Just from personal experience, having been on that trail many, many times. And, I've been on both ends of that. I've probably been going too fast on that trail myself once or twice, but I've also seen it on the other end where I'm like, oh, that guy was going way too fast and he almost clipped me. So yeah, I can totally understand that. 20 miles per hour would be at least no more than that for sure. And if you're on an e-bike, I think the safety risk there is like, your typical road biker, especially those going really fast, they're probably on a carbon fiber bike that weighs a couple of pounds versus an e-bike user. If they're going that same speed at that velocity with a 50-pound bike, there's much more danger there, I think, than your carbon fiber bike, which is going to crumple like a piece of paper compared to the e-bike, which is going to do a lot of damage, I think.
Do you know of any research studies on this, Luke?
I don't, not off the top of my head. Good question. Yeah, but if I come across any, or if I recall some that I'm forgetting now, I'll let you know.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. And actually, Matt, that same guy who does our Safe Routes program, this is an area of emphasis for him as well. He really handles a lot of our e-bike related questions and policies. And so he's like kind of a subject matter expert just by his level of interest in it. So I can have him follow up on this as well.
That'd be outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting question. I mean, there definitely needs to be some kind of standard, probably statewide. And so, yeah, I definitely want to follow up with the bill and what that does as well to this conversation, because I think that's a key piece of this too.
All right, Luke, thank you very much. A
Yeah.
lot of good information, a lot of good discussion here today. So we are at 1:02, and we had one other item on the agenda yet today. Guys, how do you want to, Curtis, Aaron, how do you want to handle the next item on our agenda?
Will partially depend on questions from you or the council members, Mayor, but I think we can be done in under 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, so we will move on to the next item then, and that is the Urbandale Downtown Master Plan update. So guys, I'll turn it over to you. So again, thank you, Luke.
Everybody, I really appreciate the opportunity to have an informed conversation, and just really appreciate your dedication and just your level of intentionality on the conversation. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Luke.
Yep.
Okay, are we back?
Yes.
And you see my screen, no problem?
Yes.
Okay, away we go. This is a brief touch base before the council meeting next Tuesday night, simply to provide a bit of context for where we've been, where we're going, transmit a few pieces of information, and then at the very least, take down any questions that you want us to look into before next Tuesday. So away we go. To recap, the plan has 8 recommendations. Number 1, reconfigure Douglas to a 3-lane road. Just to remind you that that's the anticipated sample cross section. Number 2, focus development at those 2 strategic locations, temporarily called the Big and Little Node at 70th and Douglas and 67th and Douglas. Number 3, to establish a distinct character and identity for the district. Number 4, to create the district parking management plan. We know that if successful, we're going to need to handle more parking downtown. Number 5, pursue this stormwater strategy on a sub-regional basis. Number 6, increase via gentle density in the adjacent neighborhoods, middle housing on our existing parcels. Number 7, appropriately after this conversation, encourage bicycle use downtown. And number 8, pursue a phased strategy for the redevelopment. So understanding that we can't do everything at once. This is going to be a decades-long project to its full build-out, so taking it piece by piece. So some of the items that we wanted to make sure you were aware of is there are several companion studies that informed the overall master plan. One was an economic study by AECOM, and it just wanted to pass along to you some of the highlights. Number 1, part of the feasibility for the achieving the ultimate vision was that there are a number of underutilized parcels downtown. They are highly susceptible to change. Most often that the land value is worth substantially more than the property, the building value on it. So those are sought for redevelopment. Number 2, the construction cost estimates and achievable rents indicate that new downtown mixed-use development is feasible. That does assume that there will be city investment in supporting infrastructure. And so just a frame of reference is early on as the downtown redevelopment is taking shape, there will be a need for public investment to encourage the private investment. Early stage will be approximately in the $1 public dollar could yield $4 of private investment. But then in later phases, the public investment will leverage more like $6 to $10 of private investment. Speaking of the public investment, Bolton and Bank, who's also on the line incidentally, thank you, Andrew and Peter, for being here. The public investment, the total infrastructure investment overall is estimated at approximately $33 million. That is for all of the infrastructure from beginning to end. So that is that full build out. This is not, 1 or 2 CIPs worth of projects, but these are multiple projects over many years. Also, of course, in the early stages, development incentives will likely be necessary. Almost, you could say, should be expected, as we've been doing already to encourage investments in the downtown. The good news is that those incentives and public investments will be offset by new property tax revenue potential. These are investments designed to yield public investment. Incidentally, in the master plan, one fully developed mixed-use project could, over its 40-year life, produce property tax revenue of around $33 million, which incidentally and coincidentally is the current estimated total infrastructure investment. So a reminder that while public investment and incentive will be necessary, there is the expectation of successful projects. A reminder of the engagement to date, and we've added the City Council public hearing on May 20, so substantial engagement. We also had open field comments on the website. We received 10 comments. Those are summarized here. In general, strong support. People asking us to remember to also bring entertainment and retail along with apartments. Consider seniors. Make sure that the design is accessible for all people of all abilities. support those trail connections and integration with services like DART. Watch for traffic, parking, and zoning concerns, and I think we are aware of that, and that's why we've been so careful to make sure people are up to date on this. Consider city presence and investments as a sign of our commitment. Watching for tone and clarity in the plan documents, and we are working right now with Bolton and Meg to make sure that any typos, inconsistencies, etc. And then, of course, there are people who look at this sideways and say, can it really happen? And is there value in doing it? But that is really one comment of the 10 we received. So overwhelming support and positive comments. All of the information, Ebony Woods and Aaron DeYoung are working to make sure that that gets posted on our Downtown Urbandale page, which is there at urbandale.org/downtown. The council letter will point to that as the place where these documents live once they're finalized. So that's where you can find everything. So we've got another meeting today here at the work session to interact with you as well as open up to members of the public. This will be on the agenda for adoption next Tuesday night. And then post-adoption, we want to get moving on plan implementation as soon as possible. So with that, and mindful of the time, I'll stop talking, but just wanted to make sure that there was a chance to hear your questions or comments. And if we can't answer them today, we'll prepare to do it on Tuesday. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you very much, Curtis. And mindful of the time, are there any quick comments or questions?
The one quick one I have is just talking about Big Node, the path, trail, road, doesn't have to be today, but just having that conversation of how do we handle that and what do we want to do?
Yep, absolutely. We anticipated that, Councilmember Rosendahl. And one example that we wanted to show, well, first of all, one important thing about a master plan is that it is in fact a plan. It sends a signal for design. And then as we move into the actual design of the project, we'll have a second bite at the apple to make sure that meets expectations. But it was helpful that Andrew Dresner pointed out an example in Batavia, Illinois. So you see waterfront, downtown district in Batavia. You can see this bricked area called River Street, and I'm going to pull the street view over here so you can see it. It provides an example of what that might look like. So turning around here, this is an example of that area where cars could go through there, but you can see that the interaction with the street isn't one that would be likely to be used, but does provide that access for deliveries or people who are mobility challenged and need to be dropped off, say in a wheelchair, for example, at a front door, could do that. There's also the ability to put up bollards or other kinds of signals that indicate that traffic isn't regularly used to go there, but really opens to pedestrians and bicyclists. So wanted to share that example. I thought it was helpful to picture that, but definitely mindful of that comment.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Certainly.
All right. Thank you, Curtis. Thanks for that information. Anything for the good of the order? We realize we're over our time limit. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So we had a lot to cover today. So. Hearing nothing, then I will adjourn the meeting and we will see you next Tuesday for our regular meeting. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Tonight, coming on out to Dallas County, folks.
Oh, I'll be there.
Yes, the ribbon cutting.
5:30 tonight, ribbon cut.